The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover how.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Well, hello, November, everybody. Yes, it is Monday, November 3rd. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. It is an Agronomic Monday. And did you know November is my second least favorite month of the year? That's right. February, first least favorite, followed closely by November. It is a November day here in the Ottawa Valley. It is gray, it is wet, it is cold. But you know what? Hey, I'm excited for the holiday season coming up, so we're just going to take it. We have to have the changing of seasons. We had Halloween last weekend. It was a roaring success. We celebrated some Day of the Dead this past weekend. We, of course, also lamented the loss of our beloved Blue Jays in the World Series. I got to tell you, there were a lot of sad Canadians over the weekend. But next year, hey, they're going to take it all, right? Isn't that how it works? All right. Well, so we put the ball season to bed. Now we can all focus on hockey. But today we are, of course, talking about none of that. And we are all focused on agronomy. So on today's show, I do have Peter Wheat Pete Johnson on the line. I've got so many questions for him because there are plenty of things that have sort of stacked up in the last week when it comes to corn harvest, grain storage and corn storage specifically. We are going to talk a little bit about new varieties, and we're going to round out the show with a discussion on tillage systems. And this is one of those questions that Pete has wanted to tackle for many weeks. We will do an agronomist on this question of when you change one thing, or if you want to change a practice, so whether that's fertility, whether that's tillage, whether that's time of year, seeding or planting, like adding a fall crop, of course, there are things that change across the entire rotation that may work to the good, but also may require extra adaptation. So we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. So make sure you stick around for that. We also have a product spotlight today with David Gallant of the Canadian Canola Growers Association. That's in segment 3. And if you've got feedback on anything we talk about today, give us a call or text that feedback line 1-855-776-6147. All right, let's hop to a break and I'll be back with Peter Johnson right after this. I am Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now, Tim Dara, Canola Technical Strategy Lead for DeKalb. This is the time of year where we're sitting down, we're looking back at 2025, thinking forward to 2026. How then do the reps and DeKalb really help growers make the final hybrid decision?
They really do spend a lot of time out in the field looking at these products and getting to understand them. And I think one of the things we don't shy away from when we're looking at that or looking at trials is there's wins and losses, and we talk about them all because you learn as much from a loss as you do a win. You really get to understand where those products are supposed to be grown and where they're going to fit, and they really get in and get their hands dirty and get that understanding. Having that conversation with them, they're going to be able to talk to you about your farm and what kind of situations and what kind of challenges you have, and be able to help guide you in that choice in terms of finding that right product. We've actually leaned into AI just a little bit, and we've got a tool on our website that allows growers to go through and input some of the challenges that they have, kind of information that they want to have, guides them towards a selection. So that's DeKalbSeedSelector.ca.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Agronomic Monday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And are you ready to make more confident decisions on your farm? Our precision agronomists and financial experts provide tailored recommendations that align field performance with your business goals and deliver real financial results. Success starts in the soil. Book your appointment today at mmp.ca. Yes, it is Agronomic Monday, and that means most Mondays we've got with us Peter Wheat Pete Johnson, our resident agronomist here with Real Agriculture. Pete, were you heartbroken over the Jays?
Oh gosh, Lyndsey, they gave it their all. We really thought we had it in the, when we were up 4-1. Yes, I was heartbroken. It was. It's rare that I kind of go to bed grumpy, but I actually went to bed grumpy that night. It's like, that's not who Pete is. I'm just not like that, but it's like, dang it. How could that happen? Anyway, they lost the 1 in 18 innings as well. That was another heartbreaker. So kudos to them. Let's step back a pace from not winning the World Series to the fact that at the beginning of the season, I think they were in the basement and they made it to the World Series. And this is quite an accomplishment. And so hats off to the Blue Jays, and we're looking forward to next year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Was a bit of a heartbreaker, gotta tell you. And here at Real Agriculture, of course, we have plenty of very devoted sports fans. So everybody's sort of moping this week. But anyway, you're right, Pete. Onward and upward next season. Go Jays, go. Okay, I want to start. We've got so much to unpack this week, which you would think, here we are into November, there's nothing growing, right? Should be fine. No, there's still so much to talk about. But we want to start with, and this is something that for anyone who listens to the word knows, that Peter Wheat Pete Johnson wants you to stay safe. Safety takes many forms. We are talking this week, at least. There is still plenty of harvest still happening, and we did see a few not so great moments. And we do have a safety reminder. So I think it was Josh with Grain Farmers of Ontario tweeting out a caution about what we're doing on the roads.
Yes, absolutely, Lyndsey. And we want people to be safe, but we also, gosh, if you were on the road and you weren't well lit, or you didn't have an SMV sign or whatever, and someone else gets hurt, you have to live with that for the rest of your life. And that's one thing that Wheat Pete does not want to live with for the rest of his life. And as agriculture, we should just do better. So Josh tweeted out a picture of a tractor going down the road with their field working lights on after dark. No hazard lights flashing. And so two things wrong there. And it was just the tractor. There was nothing behind it. But field working lights are blinding. I have come up on agricultural equipment, combines or tractors at night where they had their field lights on, and you can't see anything because when we're in the field, we want it to blast light everywhere. We want it to be daylight. Well, man, if you're looking into the sun, you can't see. You're blinded, and we just can't go down the road with those field lights on. You have to, turn the field lights off, turn the flashers on, and for goodness sakes, make sure you have at the back of your equipment good lights, because I don't know. We just have to, from a public perception standpoint, from a safety standpoint, and from a let's just be reasonable human beings. So if you don't have that on your equipment, then just leave it parked in the field until daylight, or figure out some other way to move it.
Right, because the opposite issue is, let's say you've maybe lost power, something's wrong, whatever the case may be, or, you don't have taillights, let's say, or you don't have your flashers on. And I've seen this just recently. If you don't have sufficient lights in the dark for heading home, to your point, Pete, just maybe park it wait till daylight or use pilot vehicles or trailing vehicles. Let's stay safe and make sure everybody gets home, including those in that equipment. So I think it's a good reminder. And I know when it's go time, something like lights that are out can be, a frustration, but we got to remember, especially, on the roads, if you're in an area where people aren't used to farm equipment, because let's face it, there are some very populated areas now that we're farming in. It's just so important. So take a minute, and if it takes a little longer, that's okay. Good reminder, Pete. Okay, now we're going to switch to the topic that, I don't know, I'm kind of surprised it's as controversial this fall as it is, but the many reasons that this corn crop is either not drying down or drying down in a weird way, there seems to be either no clear answer or maybe conflicting answers on what's happening. And we talked about this last week. You mentioned it on the word as well, but there's still more to unpack. So where are we at on this? Why the heck won't corn dry down?
So, Lyndsey, I think part of the reason there's so much confusion out there is that there's so many different scenarios from a rainfall standpoint. And in almost every one of those scenarios, corn is not drying down normally. And so that's where we get some conflicting evidence or thought processes. But when we look at it, we have the super droughted areas. So we go into the central part of Ontario, some of eastern Ontario, and even some of southwestern Ontario on the sands of Norfolk, for example, where it was so dry that the corn simply totally ran out of moisture and never got moisture and eventually just died. And it robbed everything it could out of the stalk to the point where there was nothing left in the stalk. And even if there was the odd green leaf and you got a shower, nothing moved. And it was because there was nothing left to move. And in those situations, our good friend Mark from Napanee, his corn never got past half milk line. He's combining it now. It has dried down reasonably. It's coming out of the field under 28% moisture, which is, for corn that didn't black layer, it's okay. In fact, I think some of his corn's actually down to 24% moisture, but he's looking at extremely hard to thrash and get it off the cob because his kernel integrity is just horrendous because it never black layered. It never pushed that photosynthate into the kernel and made it a nice, hard, starchy kernel. And he talks about the bottom part of that kernel, the bottom tip or even maybe a quarter of that kernel being kind of a grayish color. And again, it just did not fill normally. So where those crops ran out of moisture and didn't black layer, they stayed high in moisture for quite some time because the plant kept thinking, or not, plants don't think, pardon me. The plant kept waiting, not mature. If some rainfall came, if the conditions happened, it would finish filling, but it just died before it got that chance. Then we move into the extreme opposite, and we kind of go north of London, up into the short season areas, Grey Bruce counties. And that area, for a lot of that area, I got to be careful because I farm in that area and I was extremely dry, not as dry as central Ontario, but still like things died from drought. But much of that area, particularly you get kind of Clinton and north of Clinton and up into the Bruce Peninsula, they actually had excellent moisture pretty much all year and even excessive moisture. And in those areas, the corn is also not drying down. Now, they have excellent yields, but the corn is still in some cases 35%. I know some large operators who basically haven't started harvest yet because it's just too wet. And Lyndsey, you know that I'm a big get it out of the field when you can, but at 35% moisture, again, you can't do a good job combining. And we need to talk about fines in the crop. That's not part of the maturity talk, but it's definitely in the field this year and something we need to talk about. But in that situation, you step back and say, well, gosh, it was a hot summer, right, Lyndsey? Mm-hmm. And so if it was a hot summer, why didn't the corn black layer? What I find phenomenally interesting is that when you look at the heat unit accumulations, we're actually behind normal. And so the crop, like when I looked at some of my clients' corn and we tasseled on, let's say July 25th, we should have black layered 60 days later, give or take September 25th. And when we went into those fields and looked, no, on September 25th, they were, I don't know, half milk line. Like they were still significantly away from being black layered. And you go, how can that happen? But when we look at heat unit accumulation, it just wasn't as hot as we thought. And part of that, I mean, there's been some questions around smoke. We talked about that last week. All smoke does is keep the temperature a bit lower so that we didn't drive it as fast as we thought that we did. And we didn't black layer quite as quickly. And in-field variability has been massive this year. We have 20% corn in the field. And down the same pass in that field, the same combine pass, we have 30% moisture. And so a lot of this comes down to, did it have enough moisture from underneath? Did we get into drought dormancy where the corn's 30%, where the corn had better moisture, it was able to actually mature properly? And in the northern area, we have to start looking, in my opinion, at nighttime temperatures. So if it wasn't black layered on September the 25th like we expected, every time that nighttime temperature dips below 9 Celsius, we don't make any headway the next day. It dips below 4 Celsius, we actually lose 3 days. And we don't take that into consideration with our models in terms of trying to calculate growing degree units or crop heat units. And so some people are looking at growing degree units. It's a different way to calculate it, but it's still a heat accumulation. And we, like all of those systems, we just didn't hit black layer as early as we expected. And then you look at other things that we haven't even ever talked about, things like pericarp thickness. And
Whoa, hang on. What the heck's a pericarp?
The pericarp is the outer waxy layer of that corn kernel.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm throwing you
go.
another curveball.
Yeah, okay. Why is this important?
Because we push the moisture out of the kernel, and so that means the moisture has to cross the pericarp. Some of it can come out, out the bottom end of the kernel. But most of the time, once we black layer, if the corn actually black layered properly and sealed that bottom of the kernel off, we don't get a lot of moisture movement out of that black layer area. Some, but essentially we put it in the dryer and we have to push the moisture out and we have to go through the pericarp. If the pericarp is thicker than normal, waxier than normal, it's harder to push that moisture through a thick, waxy layer because moisture doesn't like to move through thick wax. And I've a number of growers who have said to me, man, I'm harvesting corn at 28% or 25% or whatever, but it's drying like corn that was at 35%. It's just taken, well, I had one particular grower tell me he thought it was taking him 3 times the amount of time to dry 25% moisture corn that it has other years. And so if this pericarp is part of that problem, and nobody measures pericarp, right, but we have seen that the things have not moved quickly, which typically says that pericarp is a bit thicker. And is it a bit thicker because it wasn't filling as fast, because it got under some stress from the drought? I don't know those answers. I don't think anybody actually knows the whole answer to this, Lyndsey, but there's many of these things going on. And then the last thing that we need to remember is equilibrium moisture content. And so this is the concept that at a given temperature and a given relative humidity, if left at those conditions long enough, what moisture would the corn kernel get to? And so when it's in September, the equilibrium moisture content can be, with a 25-degree day that's at 30% relative humidity, that it might be 10% corn or 8% corn. When we get to this time of year, the best we can hope for is 20% corn. And if you're looking at corn that, the equilibrium moisture content is 20% and it's sitting in the field at 35%, that's quite a small differential to drive it out. If you add a thick pericarp, it just doesn't move the moisture out quickly. The differential that lets the moisture come out of the kernel is not great enough. So lots of things going on. Still not sure we have the whole answer, but I do there's a bunch of these, discussion points out there. Some people talking about hot nights. Hot nights would just actually move the corn crop along faster in its maturity, and it would actually respire more. And if it respires more, that means it would yield less. But I can't see the link with hot nights really resulting in corn that doesn't dry down unless it thickened that pericarp layer because it was trying not to let that moisture get away.
Okay. Oh my goodness. There's so many things to unpack on this one. I can't believe it. All right. We need to take a quick break. And when we come back, I do want to hit on the standability portion of this. But more importantly, you did mention the fines. That's definitely one of those things we need to think about. And that's, of course, safely storing this crop. So we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Hey, Frank, where are you running to?
Oh, hey. In Vigor. Book and buy.
Huh?
Oh, yeah. $30 off per bag. Ends November 14th. Gotta get down to our local retail.
What? Like a rebate on the eligible in Vigor hybrids we grow?
Yes! You come in or not?
Get in the truck. We'll get there faster.
Oh, thank you.
Hurry to invigorbookandbuy.ca for complete offer details. Terms and conditions apply.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight. We're going to talk about the Advanced Payments Program. We're talking to Dave Gallant, who's the VP of Finance and APP Operations with the Canadian Canola Growers Association. Dave, it's great to chat with you again.
Well, thanks for having me, Sean.
Okay, so let's talk about cash advance. And I guess right off the top, for anyone that's unfamiliar with the cash advance program with CCGA, tell us about the program and how it works for farmers.
So a cash advance is a farmer-designed loan program that gives farmers access to cash flow for their inventory without having to sell that inventory. So you can be growing it, you can have it in the bin, you can have it in the field. And as long as you've got that inventory, you have access to get very low cost working capital for your inventory. The first $250,000 for all commodities that we do, so that's grains, oilseeds, livestock, and honey, is interest free. And this year, the government has made an additional $250,000 interest-free available for farmers with canola. So a farmer can get up to $500,000 interest-free under the program, with the remaining $500,000 available to them at below prime. So that can save you $20,000, $30,000 in interest costs this year compared to regular financing from the bank or the local credit union. The program is very easy to use, and farmers only repay as they sell the product on their advance.
Okay, and do farmers take cash advances at this time of the year, like right at the wrap up of harvest, or how do the bulk of farmers typically use the loan?
Farmers take advances throughout the year. So a lot of our customers will take advances in the spring when they're putting the crop in the ground or when they're breeding their cattle. But a lot of farmers wait until they know what's in the bin, what the quality is and what the quantity of the grain is in the bin. And so right now is one of our busiest times of the year as farmers are taking advantage of the program to use that money for either paying the bills of getting that crop in the ground, paying for raising those animals, or to be able to take advantage of pricing opportunities that are available for next year's crop. So buying inputs or seed at discount.
Yeah, good point. Probably a lot of connection to when you need the cash is when you're actually using the program. So does a cash advance work equally well for a wide variety of farmers? Like, for example, like a young farmer transitioning to take over, what should they know if they're new to the business side of farming and managing the cash flow? Not everybody's a wily veteran of the cash flow program.
So it's a great program for those transitioning into farming, simply because you only need to own the inventory. So you can be renting the land, you can be borrowing the land, same with the equipment. But as long as you own the inventory and you sell that inventory yourself, you can get access to a cash advance, which means for those transitioning onto the farm, it allows them to get farm credit now and get a foothold in the industry without having to have major capital investments. So it's a great program for those just starting. And for anybody who's using financing for their working capital needs, given the very low interest costs, it applies whether you're a small farmer or a farmer with $5 million of inventory. You can still save a lot of money by using a cash advance.
And of course, there's a lot of attention right now on trade issues, in particular, canola in China. The government has introduced some changes to the program. Are we seeing a significant uptick of farmers using some of the program this year based on some of the changes?
Yes, we are. So on September the 6th, the Prime Minister announced that the program was going to be changed to allow farmers with canola up to an additional $250,000 interest-free. And that was just around the start, or just as harvest was beginning. And so as harvest is wrapped up now across Western Canada, we are seeing a significant increase of farmers coming to us asking about the program, wanting to learn about the program, and definitely taking advantage of that extra $500,000 or $250,000 interest-free that's available to them. So we're seeing a lot bigger advances coming through the door, and we're seeing a lot more customers coming for the first time.
Yeah. So how do I get in touch with CCGA if I am interested in getting a loan app started?
The easiest way is to call us at our 1-800 number, 1-866-745-2256. Our dedicated contact center staff will walk you through the process, answer any questions, and it takes about, if you're brand new, 20 minutes to complete an application on the phone.
Only 20?
They'll have it 20 minutes.
Oh.
It'll be emailed to you with a detailed list of anything else we require and where you need to sign it so that you can get it back to us as quickly as possible and we can deposit those funds right into your bank account.
Hey, Dave, give us the number one more time.
It's 1-866-745-2256.
Great stuff. Hey, Dave, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Time to get excited about your fields again thanks to Excite Bio Yield Plus. It's a phosphate-solubilizing ag biological that works on oilseeds, cereals, and legumes. For 15 years, we've been helping farmers achieve healthier plants and higher yields with our premium liquid inoculants. For more information on Excite Bio Yield Plus or one of our other premium products, call 1-855-948-3246 or visit excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca. At Excite Bio, inoculants and ag biologicals, it's all we do.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Monday, November 3rd, and this segment brought to you by The Dirt. From nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast, is your place for farm smart topics to boost your profitability. Join Mike Howell on Season 4 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrient-economics.com. That's economics with a K. All right, we hop back now to our conversation with Pete Johnson. Pete, before we leave the corn conversation, one last point on harvest, the standability concern. With all this talk of, of course, this plant that tried to take everything out of the leaves, the stalk, to try and finish up and black layer, etc., we've definitely got some standability issues out there. What are you hearing?
So, Lyndsey, for the most part, and this is not everywhere, but for the most part, so far, standability has been holding up pretty doggone well. So that's a good news story, but I don't want anybody to say, oh, Pete says standability's fine, there's no rush, because that's not the right answer. We know that the stalks are weak. We are seeing some stalk break. We know that the shanks are also quite weak, and so we can get into more cob drop. And just a quick note for my good friend Mark Sultanfess, who's an agronomist down in the Delmarva region of the United States, so the eastern seaboard, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, that's what they call Delmarva. And he farms as well, and he had 60 acres left, and standability had been great. And then before he got to that 60 acres, a big wind came through and he had real lodging issues. And I'm so concerned about that this year as well here in Ontario, because the stalks are weak, the shanks are weak. We've managed so far. Don't take the risk. So yeah, and it's not like there's people talking about disease stalks. And certainly there could be some disease, but in a lot of cases, we just didn't make the photosynthate to have a good, thick stalk that would give us good standability. In fact, in the really droughted areas on the Norfolk Sand Plain, there was some fields that were basically all flat well before they got combined without much wind because they just fell apart. They simply fell apart. And it's not a disease thing. It's just a lack of stalk integrity. So that's one thing. The other thing that's really interesting in the corn crop, Lyndsey, and we haven't talked about this much, but we're seeing way more sprouting on the cob.
Really?
Yeah, which is really interesting. And part of that is fusarium. Mm-hmm. If you affect the hormonal balance in that kernel, and fusarium does that, you will see sprouted kernels. So often we get kernels that at the tip of the cob will have this starburst look. That's fusarium. And in that area that, that got good moisture, Grey Bruce, North Huron, that part of the world, we saw lots of starbursting. Well, those kernels are sprouting. But the other interesting thing that I'd never heard of, and Greg Stopps from Pioneer Hybrid pointed this out to me, is that if you open up many cobs, you will see the odd silk laying down the length of the row, and it generally goes to a kernel that didn't pollinate. So that silk waited for a grain of pollen so that it would pollinate. It never got that. It kept its integrity longer. And we're actually seeing little cuts, so we call them silk cuts, in the kernels where that silk runs down the cob. And in many cases where we got that silk cut, we affected the hormonal balance in that kernel, and we are seeing those kernels sprout. So sprouted corn doesn't yield as much, right? That's where we really get into the phantom yield loss that's not so phantom that we talked about last week. So lots of things going on out there that, we just need to deal with.
Okay. Now, it also means with a less than ideal corn crop, we're going to potentially have issues in the dryer and, of course, into the bin. And we are seeing some of that. I did want to send a shout out for anyone as we have this conversation. We're going to mention the discussion with Sean Schill on The Agronomist. It was episode 212. So head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomist. Scroll down, episode 212. We did talk about grain storage, and Sean Schill talks about coring the bins. But Pete, moisture rebound in the bins is something we have to watch for.
Yes, 100%. And so if you think about it, Lyndsey, when we're drying that corn, we need to get the moisture out of the middle of the kernel so that because a moisture tester is electrical conductivity. And if the electrical conductivity goes from kernel to kernel to kernel through the outer part of the kernel only, and we've pulled that down to 15% moisture, but the inside of that kernel, I mean, gosh, if we started off at 30% moisture corn, the inside of that kernel could still be at 22%, 23%. And so we get this moisture rebound. And I've had a number of people tell me that that's happening. I think it happens worse with the thick pericarp that we talked about because it just takes longer to drive that moisture out of the center of the kernel through that waxy layer. Or it also happens worse in drought-stressed corn because in drought-stressed corn, the starch granules don't adhere to each other quite as nicely, like the kernel integrity is poor. And so the moisture migration from the center of the kernel to the outside to get that whole corn kernel at 15% moisture is slower. So from a drying perspective, I think growers really need to monitor their bins for this moisture rebound, and some dryer operators are drying corn to 14%, or I mean, in some extreme cases, even less than that. Remember, it takes a lot of cost, a lot of energy to take those last moisture points out. But if it's going to rebound in the bin, you just have to really watch it from that perspective, or you have to over dry it so when the rebound happens, it doesn't go over 15% and you don't end up with a bin of spoiled corn.
That's right. Now, we did mention the coring of the bins, and this was, I think, definitely the approach that Sean Schill takes, a little different. It was an excellent teaching moment for many of us. But what are producers where does coring of the bin come in when we're talking fines and those sorts of things as well?
So Lyndsey, I find this so fascinating, and I am not a storage expert. I am absolutely not, but I understand the principles. But, we've always said, use a bin spreader and spread so that it fills level and we don't get all the fines in the center. And then Warren Schneckenberger, a great RealAg supporter, he tweets out that he's not using spreaders anymore. And the conversation in that thread was fascinating. So if you don't use a bin spreader, what a lot of the comments were in that discussion thread, all of the fines stay in the very center of the bin so that you core the bin right after you fill it. And the fines are in this 2-foot diameter circle was I think Warren's number, whether it's 2 feet or whatever, but you pull those fines out first and the rest of the corn just is firm and whole kernels because all the fines settle in the middle, and that coring process and re-cleaning that and getting rid of those fines out of it is a better process than having the fines in an 8-foot circle or a 12-foot circle, because even with a bin spreader, fines are lighter than whole kernels, and you are not going to throw the fines to the outside edge of that bin, or you're going to throw all of the kernels against the edge of the bin and smash the daylights out of them. So that was fascinating to me. And I'm not telling growers that's right or wrong. I just find this discussion fascinating. Sean Schill had a different approach. He used the bin spreader, but as he filled the bin, about every 2 rings or 5 feet, I think it was, I'd actually have to watch it to know whether it's 5 feet or 10 feet. But as he fills that bin, he will core it as he fills the bin. So if 10 feet, core, 10 feet more, core. And in that way, he doesn't end up with fines at the bottom of the bin in that 12-foot circle, and the core only pulling out the 2-foot center, and the other 10 feet of that diameter becoming a problem. So I don't know. You work so hard to get that crop harvested. You just have to make sure that it does not go off quality in the bin. So just a couple of things to think about that there and do some research on. And Lyndsey, I don't know, maybe we should talk to some more storage experts about this whole thought process.
I did want to send a shout out though for those who did watch the show, or maybe if you're going to, please do, because Sean Schill, we have a Sean Schill original drawing in that show that explains what he does. And it is excellent artwork. I highly recommend watching the show just for that component of it. Anyway, who knew he was just, such an artist? It's really quite remarkable. Okay, Pete, let's leave it there for just a moment because that's our segment, and because I want to switch gears entirely. So we may as well take a break, and we'll come back with more. We're going to talk about some yields, some numbers, and 1,000 kernel weight, which I love. Okay, so let's take a break. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. It is Monday, November 3rd. And have you got your DeKalb seed booked? Book early and take advantage of savings with the DeKalb Rewards program. Visit DeKalbRewards.ca for more details. All right, rounding out the show, we've got Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. And Pete, my apologies. I made you talk about corn for almost an entire show. And I apologize profusely. Let's switch gears. Let's move on to cereals, to spring wheat, to barley. We've got some numbers to talk. We've got some yields to talk about. What was posted?
Yeah, and so actually, given the season, you would have expected that our yields would be off on spring cereals, but actually we're looking at some really excellent yields in spring cereals this year. The final numbers aren't in on the provincial averages, but we do have on the Go Crops website, we now have both the spring wheat and also the spring barley yields up and the performance trial data there. We're just waiting on oats because we have one site where we're still working with the data, but anticipate that it will be up within the next day or two. And I'm always excited when we get that performance trial data because it just drives your new variety decisions. And boy, there are some new varieties coming that really do set, I think, a new standard for yield level, particularly in barley and oat. With spring wheat, maybe not quite so much, but still, have a look at those trials. I think that's really exciting information.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. And let's face it, it is the time to be planning for next year. Even though some of us are still out grazing. So, our grazing season continues, but hats off to everybody trying. I will say, Pete, and I hope anyone listening locally is as impressed as I am. So we are the crazy people, A, with sheep, B, that graze our sheep all over the place. And so doubly crazy. But for the first time since I've lived here, we've also got some cows out on corn stalks. And I haven't seen that in the almost 10 years I've been here. Now, I think it's probably a function of just how dry we were, yes. But also, I got to tell you, it's encouraging to see ruminants out on the landscape. Because they're actually pretty good at walking to find their food. So there you go.
Yeah, if they're hungry and there's food out there.
No, these ones are fenced. They're supposed to be there. So just so everyone's aware, I'm not advocating for loose cattle. Anyway.
No, but the one, can I just mention the one thing on that is that if you happen to have the odd cob on the ground that might cause you some volunteer corn problems next year, Yeah, no longer an issue. Exactly
No
right.
longer
Yeah.
an issue. Yeah, exactly. And hey, they're spreading their manure as they go, and biology loves manure. Soil biology loves it. So hey, why not? So yes, but also, I mean, it does, I think, speak to, and the area I'm in, the Ottawa Valley, not nearly as dry as some other areas, but absolutely, third cut, fourth cut. I mean, there wasn't a fourth cut for many. So, hay supplies are definitely down. Why not stretch your stored feed and graze for a little while? I'm a big proponent of it. Now we have two topics, Pete, that I think we are going to, well, I know we are going to tackle them on the Agronomist over the winter. I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussions about these as well. But one of the key things that, and I'm sure you'll talk about it on the Word as well, I want to talk tillage systems. One of the other topics is crop sequencing. We'll get to that at some point, but I don't think we have enough time today. I want to talk tillage systems because this is, as an outsider looking in, which I'm pretty sure I'm still for like another 20 years, having come from Western Canada and come to Ontario, I'm always struck by the time it takes to change just any practice really, and that it takes several years to implement. But I'm always fascinated by the sort of cascading effects of you change one thing and then it impacts another thing. And sometimes those impacts are positive, overly positive. Sometimes they're negative, or sometimes they're just different. And I imagine thinking about tillage systems is similar in that you have to think about, multi-years, not just one. Talk to me, though, about the conversations you're having on producers as they try to tackle a tillage system overall.
So, Lyndsey, I mean, you talk tillage, and oh my gosh, it's almost like politics because people get so, I don't know, they just have such strong opinions. Let me phrase it that way. Such strong opinions on tillage. And Pete's like that as well because Pete is always of the opinion you do the absolute minimum amount of tillage required. I used to be Peter No-Till before I was Wheat Pete, but they're just, no-till doesn't work in every situation, whereas wheat works in every situation, Lyndsey. Just let me say that.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I've evolved. But man, I want less tillage. But the challenge is that as you move to less tillage, it's exactly like you said, that it is a system and tillage is part of the system. And if you don't think through the other parts of the system, then oftentimes those changes fail. So I had a grower reach out to me and he kind of, it's funny because I always push people towards less tillage. And if they're going to make a move towards less tillage, they often will reach out. And so the grower said, I've been a moldboard plow person. I'm in a 2-crop rotation with grain, corn, and spring cereals. It's not a bad rotation. They're a livestock producer. I'd like to see some legumes in there, some hay or whatever, but regardless, that's where they're at. But so instead of using the moldboard plow, I'm just going to go to a high-speed disc. What do you think? Well, right away, it's okay. It's not just the high-speed disc. So now a high-speed disc does not do the level of weed control that a moldboard plow does. And we've talked about this, Lyndsey, right? Mm-hmm. People drive over weeds in the spring or in the fall with a high-speed disc and it all looks black and you think it's great. And you come back in a week and you realize that, oh gosh, there's all these weeds, and it might only be 10% of the weed population, but they escaped the high-speed disc, whereas if I moldboard plow them and I flip them upside down, I kill those weeds. I don't kill the perennial sow thistle or the Canada thistle. It comes back. But, the fleabane, the moldboard plow looks after. The fleabane, the high-speed disc does not look after. And so we have to start thinking about how the other management changes are going to come into play. The similarly thing with a disc chisel operator that is looking at moving to strip till. Well, with strip till, you don't do anything in between the strip till rows, and so weed control becomes a bigger issue. And then you also have to consider the fertility part of this discussion, because if you're doing tillage, you can work that fertility into the soil. I mean, some growers will spread the potash in the fall and even some phosphorus in the fall, and they'll moldboard plow. Well, now it's down, 6 inches. I'm not sure that's a right place for it. In fact, I'm pretty sure that isn't the exact right place for most of us. But if I'm going to spread it on the soil surface, and again, Lyndsey, you and I have talked about this in the fall, that's not what we want to do. So I changed my tillage system, and I have a grower that changed from a high-speed disc to a strip till system, but the strip till unit did not at the time have fertility capability. So now we're broadcasting the fertility on the surface, and that is not where the corn crop wants it. So from a weed control standpoint, from a fertility standpoint, from a drainage standpoint, because, tillage does affect drainage, and the more you try to go to reduce tillage, the more critical it is that you have well-drained land, and that means tile drainage. And by the way, tile drainage pays whether you have it or not. And
that's right.
And I don't care what tillage system you have, tile drainage pays. So having the tile drainage and being able to go to reduce tillage is still a win, but it's part of that management system.
So my follow-up is this, because I get it. I appreciate it. I love the complexity of it. I love how we sort of follow those decisions through. For a farmer who hears that and is like, this is what I ran into. I tried to eliminate this pass, or I tried to switch to this tool and I got caught up. How then? So I'm a planner. So how then do you encourage a farmer who is, let's say, trying to reduce tillage, move to strip till? How do you encourage them then to sort of follow that decision through? Is it 2 years down the road, 3 years, their whole rotation? How would you encourage someone to sort of figure out what other changes this one change may make to the entire rotation?
So Lyndsey, I think one is talk to other farmers that have been doing it. Now, in some cases, that may be almost none. And a great example is where we strip tilled for edible beans this year. And Matt Langford and Bern Tobin did a super edible bean school video on that. And growers should watch that if they're thinking about that. But one of the things that caught the edible bean system was strip till, because we're not so worried about fertility in the strip there. But normally you'd have a tillage pass that would make you start clean, if you will, from the time of that last tillage pass from a weed control standpoint. With the strip till system, we killed the weeds in the strip, but the weeds between the strip didn't get impacted. And so in that system, I think as you think it through, it's like, okay, so probably the best way to do this is we're going to strip till, we're going to plant the edibles, and the day after or the day we plant the edibles, we're going to go through with a glyphosate application so that we start clean with our weed control program. And so, that's just one example, but talk to other growers, talk to your agronomist. I mean, gosh, there's lots of great agronomists, but make sure you say to them, give me all the implications of this, of change X across my entire rotation, my weed control, my insect control, my disease control, my fertility. Like let's look at it as a system and just how that one simple change is going to affect 27 other things that I do in that system.
Absolutely. Okay. We are going to leave it there. For anyone who's got feedback on this episode, or of course directly to Pete or myself, Pete is at pjohnson@realagriculture.com. I'm at lsmith@realagriculture.com. And of course, you can find us across social media with Real Agriculture. Would love your feedback on today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Pete. Have a wonderful week.
Yeah, you as well, Lyndsey. Looking forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So we are going to be at the Best of Kama event in Mississauga on Thursday. Looking forward to it. We'll let you know if we win any hardware. All right. That's it. That's all, to borrow Peter's phrase. I will be back, of course, on the Friday issues panel, and we'll see you tonight on The Agronomist. Cheers, everybody.